So a little backstory on this Jeep before we get started. I ended up driving an hour or so away to pick this up from a distant relative who had parked it in their backfield 40-something years ago. Drove it to where it sat and just left it there. It looked like a straight old Jeep when he sent me photos originally. Had a bunch of junk piled in it, but, looked fairly good. Said the frame was rust-free, so I drove out there, took a look at it, and sadly that wasn't the case. As soon as we hooked a chain to it and started pulling it out of where it had been sitting, it literally broke in half. There's nothing left of this Jeep except for some parts that could maybe be saved. Luckily, I got this in a package deal with some other stuff that was in a little bit better condition. Ended up getting my money back on that, so I'm not in this thing for any money. It's just my time messing with it, trying to see if I can get this engine broke free and what can be saved. Okay, here's the damage. There's a lot of it. There is, in a literal sense, nothing left of this. I think it was a combination of being a plow Jeep, being exposed to salt, and sitting for the last, 40 years almost, just filled with dirt and leaves and trash. It really took its toll. But what impresses me about this is that even though this rotted out, the build quality back then, they just don't literally make them like they used to. So you see everything's got a grease fitting. Even though this frame rotted away, this is still free. I mean, that's crazy. I work on a lot of cars. I've done a lot of, suspension work, and you'll have 10-year-old vehicles where those bushings are froze up and you got to drive them or torch them out of there. So let's see, we can kind of see what happened here. Frame rotted out here on this side. This side is in much better shape than the other. We actually have the center section of the frame versus that side, which that's all that's left. So frame was broken here, yanking on it. The leaf spring perch came free from the frame, and then the whole rear axle slid forward. But you can see before it slid forward, it definitely slid backwards because the drive shaft pulled out of the slip yoke and they are detached. So I am going to kind of pull everything kind of back into shape, and then I'm going to use some 2x4s or something similar and ratchet strap everything together to where it kind of holds its shape, and it's going to be easier to work on. The wheels are free, so if I can get it up off the ground and supported, then I'll actually be able to move this thing around, because as of right now, yeah, it's not going anywhere. I did find some goodies inside. So I found the hydraulic pump sitting inside, which was engine driven. It's really cool. So there's the valve there that would go to this rod right here through the dash, and that's your up and down on your blade. And along with that was the hydraulic ram for the blade. So that mounted right here and then went down to, I think, right there. Or no, I think I'm wrong. I can't tell. It bolted up somewhere. Anyway, it pivoted at the back, lifted your blade up and down. So it's a pretty neat setup, and that is still usable. This could definitely go on another Willys Jeep, although I don't think it's going to be this one. So neat stuff to have. So I'll go ahead and start jacking this thing up and trying to pull it back into shape. And I'll set you guys up on another time lapse, and you can kind of see the progress, if any. I might make it worse, although I don't think I'm going to do much harm to this thing. Okay, it's a new day, and I think it's time to see if we can get this motor freed up and see what we have here. So I did verify it is stuck with a 1/2-inch breaker bar. Went ahead and took the radiator out, which wasn't very hard considering the mounting points were rotted out. So disconnected 2 hoses and up and out it came. I'm going to go ahead right now and clean out around these spark plugs, soak them down, and see if I can't get them out of there without breaking in the head. So if I can get the plugs out, I can look down in the cylinders and see exactly what we're dealing with here. So that's what I'm going to work at right now, and I'll bring you guys back once I've made some progress. Well, it's not looking good. So I started cleaning around the first plug, and I noticed it's already loose. So I was thinking, okay, whoever tried to get it running before pulled the plugs out. So maybe I'll have a easy time here. And I got to the second one, and yeah, that doesn't look too hot down there. Came around, cleaned up the third one, and noticed it was broken off and just sitting in there. So that means water and everything has just gone directly into that cylinder. And the fourth, which is in my experience the worst, does in fact look the worst. So there's none of the hex left on that plug to get a grip on, so I doubt it's going to come out. But I'll go ahead and I'll soak down around here with some penetrating oil. And oh, what's going on with the lighting here? Whoa, stop that. Anywho, I'll just go ahead and pull out that front plug and see what it looks like inside there. Hey, we're back with some good news and bad news. The bad news is they were all busted off. So all the plugs are still down in the head. But, you know, I got greedy and I decided, well, heck, I'll see if I can get what remains of the plugs out of the head without letting it soak for several days, which is really what I should do. But I got my little torch here, just heat it up, let it focus on here for a couple minutes, get that nice and hot, and then I shocked it with some penetrating oil, and then I took a large easy out, tapped it down in there. You see the ground strap bent up out of the way. Luckily it didn't fall down in the motor, but tapped it down in there, kind of pried on it. I didn't think it was going to go, so I soaked it again with some penetrating oil and then tried again, and this first one came out. So that is pretty remarkable. You know, I thought that was going to be a lot harder than it was, which we still got 3 more to do. But you can see down in there, piston doesn't look too happy. I think this engine is really stuck, and getting these plugs out is going to be the least of my worries. But if I can get the others out, I'll go ahead and fill this up with as much penetrating oil, used oil, you know, whatever I have, and let it sit in this engine for a while. I'll go underneath, check and see if the drain plug's in it, and try to figure out why there's no oil on the dipstick, and maybe fill it up too to let the internals soak. And then we'll come back in a bit and see if we can't rock it and try to break it free. But not looking too promising down there in cylinder number 1. So far we're 2 for 2, but look at that. Completely disintegrated. But nice, shiny, brand new on the bottom side. This is crazy. See, can't see down in there, but sure it's not any better than cylinder number 1. Let me get this off and let's see if I can record one of the other cylinders. Of course, the front 2 were the best looking. The rear 2 were the worst out of the 2 and the hardest to get to. So I don't know. I'll see if I can record it and show you guys how I went about getting this out. So we left off with me being able to extract all 4 of those broken spark plugs, which was a miracle. I went ahead and filled up the cylinders with used motor oil, which isn't the best solution for getting an engine unstuck. You really need something thinner, like ATF mixed with like diesel fuel or kerosene, penetrating oil, things like that. They're a little bit thinner and tend to creep in between the rust and help break it up. Motor oil tends to just sit there on top, like you can see here. Cylinder 1 has been, staying perfectly full for several days. I'm getting ahead of myself. I bet that if I sat here and I sucked that out or drained it, filled this up with a better mixture like I talked about, and let it sit for weeks or even a month or two, that I would probably be able to get this free. But even if I did, the chances are we're going to have valves that are stuck, especially when I look down the cylinders and see how much crud's sitting there. I don't think we'd have a good chance at getting much compression. So I went ahead and zipped all the head bolts out. I'm about to pop the head off, and we'll go ahead and clean out the cylinders, get a better assessment of what we're dealing with, and then soak it and see if we can't get the valves freed up, cleaned, and so on. So let me put you on a stand here and we'll pop this off together and take a look at what's underneath. Can't get in here. There we go. Ooh. Okay. Looks like we might be pretty lucky here. Let me bring you guys in. So everything looks pretty clean except for cylinder 3. So we have a little bit of debris sitting on top of the valves. I haven't cleaned out the cylinders yet, but judging by the head here, looks pretty good, except for cylinder 3, which is the one that had the plug broken off for a long time. So I'm going to go ahead and soak all this stuff up so we can take a look here, and you can see that's water. Okay, so that's our issue there. So I bet if we get cylinder 3 cleaned up and soak it, I might be able to break it free. All right, let me fill you in. I've soaked up most of the oil here, and I mean, look at that. This is not what I expected to find. So like I said, 3 out of 4 of these are in great shape. So if somebody hadn't come along and tried to take those plugs out and broke it, this engine would probably be free. You see, like I said before, that's the culprit. The seam in the hood, water goes right down into that cylinder. Not that one in particular, but you know what I mean. Now, something else I noticed when I cleaned off the top of this piston is 0.04 on the piston size. So this has been bored 40 thousandths over, which I'll have to look up what these can be taken to, but on most engines that's getting up there. So this thing's been rebuilt and bored out before. Now this cylinder, what I'm going to do or attempt to do right now is I got wire brush on a drill. That's what I kind of cleaned up these valves with, and I'm going to knock the heavy stuff out of that cylinder, and then I'll oil it up and take my hone through there and see what it looks like after that. I have never felt like these stalagmites of rust like this. I've never seen that before in a cylinder. I've seen rust build up, but this is odd. And then it's smooth here, like the piston used to sit there, or maybe it just sat full of water up to that point, which is probably what happened. And this was open air with moisture, so it rusted more significantly than the portion that was underwater. That, or this thing has been moved or rotated in the last couple years, but I don't think that's what happened, because I don't see any marks in the other cylinders indicating the piston used to sit there. So let me just clean that up. I'll put you guys on the tripod and you can see what happens. Pretty rough. Okay, so I went from wire brush to hone to wire brush and then resorted all the way to 80 grit sandpaper. And this cylinder is horrible. It is pitted terribly, and this cylinder will, never seal upright with those rings. But I'm really not deterred because we got 3 pretty good looking cylinders, and this thing will run on 3 cylinders. So believe me, I am going to try. So the next step, after I kind of wipe that out of there, is I'm going to pour in some penetrating oil. And I know, this is all I got. Got it for free. WD-40, it works, but man, do I prefer PB Blaster or another brand. It just seems like over the years, WD-40 has kind of gone downhill as far as its potency and, its ability to actually do what it's designed to do. And back in the day, you could use this stuff as starting fluid because it was, basically that combustible. But now, well, I'll stop talking. We'll just see if it works. How about that? So I'll wipe that out and fill that one cylinder up with WD-40, and then we'll get our bar back here on the crank, just wiggle it around, and then most likely let it sit for a while and soak in there. How about that? Okay, it's been about 5 days, but made some progress. I let this thing soak with PB Blaster in it, or not PB, WD. Didn't make any progress. Broke 2 1/2-inch ratchets, or not ratchets, breaker bars. Got the 3/4 inch breaker bar on here with a jack handle. Put enough torque that it tore the motor mount, so the whole engine's flapping out of the Jeep now. Didn't get anything, so I took some blocks of wood, found this piece of tubing, which I really didn't want to do metal on the piston, but sat this on top of the piston with a block of wood, took the sledge, or the splitting maul in this case, kept whacking on the tops of the pistons, and I heard a pop, tried the ratchet on here, and now I have just a tiny bit of movement. I'll see if I can show you guys what I've got. Let's see which way. Whoops, come on. Really takes 2 hands to support this thing. See if you can see that crank pulley move. I don't know if you could see that or not, but it is moving just barely. So I'm going to keep working it back and forth, and I'll update you when I have a little bit more progress. Okay, keep an eye on those cylinders. A little tight. Let's see if we can go back the other way. Yeah, it's that cylinder number 3. Pretty rough all the way down. Starting to get easier to turn though. I think if we break through all that gunk, all that buildup and rust, cylinder 3 we'll get a full rotation here in a minute. There we go. Yep, there we hit hard spot. Let's go back. Right up there at the top. I haven't been paying attention to the valves. I don't know if they're any are moving at all or what. I see moving out of one at least. That's right there. There's too much of a ridge at the top of that cylinder. There we go. That's probably part of my problem. Got the drag wrapped up in the belt. Pieces in my whacking block. Get those out of there. I see all the valves have come up now and they're all stuck, which I expected. Well, not all of them are stuck actually. These are. Down here we got some life. I got some that are just barely stuck. They want to free up, so I think we'll be able to get the others as well. Just keep doing a couple more rotations here. Starting to get easier, about to the point where I can take this handle off. Okay, I think I'll take the hone back through there and clean it up now that I got those cylinders down at the bottom of the bore. I'll turn it over a couple more times, work on these valves, get them to where they're up. You saw how I was tapping down on it. I'll get a rubber mallet or something with a little bit more oomph that's not likely to snap the head of the valve. See if I can squirt some lube underneath and then get them to pop down in there.